remember Savannah, Georgia, 1960. I remember segregation.
You couldn't drink at the White Fountain. It was cool water, and we just had a spigot. They had restrooms for white females and white males, and one for color. And that was devastating as a young person.
Middle Ground Road was a dividing line from my house to the white people's houses. And there was an open air skating rink. We could sit in our yards and hear the music, but we couldn't go to the skating rink. We just watched the white kids skating.
We would get books from the white school, and they would have the other kids' names in them. We would get hand-me-down books.
I walked from beach to my home every day, passed by the Dairy Queen, had enough money to buy ice cream, but I would have to go to the back door, and I just didn't want it that badly.
You know, you're going to get the people that would call you the N-word, the waitresses that would not serve you, and all of that, and the people that it would harass.
I'm sorry, our management does not allow us to.
There were people that actually had Black women raising their children from birth to adulthood almost. You're allowing somebody to be that close to you. How can you not respect them as an equal?
I was coming down Victory Drive, and a car with some kids came up behind me, and they had whacked me on the back of my head. Whoa. And you couldn't really retaliate. You couldn't stand up for yourself.
It was a time when John Lewis and others had been beaten in the freedom rides in Mississippi and Alabama. We knew of the dangers that would possibly lie ahead of us.
And we felt that this is something we needed to do. Somebody had to do it because we didn't like the way we were being treated either.
I never understood how one person could beat another person or have that much hatred.
A young man by the name of Benjamin West was sitting at the lunch counter. A white man walked up and with his fist just broke his jawbone. The police, of course, were always around, and the man walked right on out the store.
There was also the presence of the KKK here in the city of Savannah in Forsyth Park, out in Garden City.
Hosea Williams had a cross burned in his yard.
I remember when the stores with lunch counters on Broughton Street were picketed by Blacks who carried signs that read, "We want a mouthful of freedom, don't buy where you can't eat, and we shall overcome."
So then my grandmother found out about the NAACP Youth Council meeting up there at the Y, the West Broad Street Y, and she took me there, and I met Wesley W. Law. And I became mesmerized because he told us about the injustices and all of the things that would happen and what we could do as young people when we got to the 60s. And the young people in North Carolina sat at the lunch counters. We said, we want to do the right thing, the same thing.
The planning was intense and it was repetitive because they literally drilled that into us about how important it was to not retaliate because that's what they wanted us to do.
So the great day of March 16th came, 1960, and we all gathered and we were at the church. It was decided who would go, where they would go.
I remember leaving the school. The principal really didn't want us to leave, which you can understand. He was worried about his job, but we just left. And the mood was, yeah, we're going downtown and we're going to demonstrate.
One group went to Crest, the other went to Woolworth. I was in the group that went to Levy's. We were supposed to make selected purchases. I remember exactly what I purchased that day. I went to the notions department and purchased a spool of thread. We felt that the same money that we used there should be good in the other part of the store, and that's when we proceeded to go to the lunch counter.
They seated themselves at a segregated lunch counter. They were refused service. They were asked to leave, but they just sat on studying their textbooks.
It was a situation where you always wonder who's in this crowd, what will they do to us? The waitresses didn't say anything to us at first. There were no menus, as I recall, on the counter. She then said, I can't serve you. You'll have to leave. We like to order hamburger and french fries. She continued to say, you'll have to leave. Finally, she said, if you don't leave, I'll have to have you arrested. And she just beckoned to the police to come over and arrest us, and they did.
We were herded into the back of what was called a paddy wagon at the time and taken to jail, fingerprinted. We were given these uniforms to put on. We got numbers, and we were all put in separate cells. And I can remember us all singing, "We Shall Overcome."
With such training as this to bolster their dedication, the sit-in movement became one of the Negro's most effective weapons. The pattern left its imprint across the entire South.
So from that day forward, that is when the fight for freedom began here with young people.
We felt it was time. It was time to do away with segregation and just that way of thinking, being made to feel inferior.
From that point on, everything was challenged. We went to the beach, went to the movies. I remember being denied entrance to the Wise Theater.
There were night marches, too, in the city of Savannah, which I think was unprecedented at that time. There would be hundreds of people on the street. I remember Hosea Williams when he stood on Tamachichi's boulder in Wright Square, declared it was going to be a long, hot summer of protest in Savannah if the city didn't desegregate.
11 o'clock on Sunday morning was the most segregated hour in the city of Savannah. So we decided we were going to do kneel-ins with Mr. Law. And we sat in at churches like St. John Episcopal Church and could not enter. And Bull Street Baptist Church could not enter. But before we left those churches, we knelt and had prayer.
We decided to boycott the department stores downtown in order to bring pressure because these department stores still didn't have black clerks in them. They were all white clerks.
You could buy certain things, but certain things you couldn't buy. It was very demoralizing.
It was not just about being able to sit at the lunch counters. It was also about jobs. It was about getting people to ring the registers. And so we did it, and we knew why.
I was never afraid because I knew why I was doing what I was doing.
If I had to give my life for something to happen, something to change, I was willing to do it. And every one of the people that's given their lives because of conditions that exist in this country, they did it willingly. If that's going to make a difference in what happens in America, then so be it.
I have always believed that unearned suffering is redemptive. And if a man has not discovered something so dear and so precious that he will die for it, then he doesn't have much to live for.
Places I've worked in, Mississippi and Alabama, I've been with people who, because their cars were blown up or their homes, and I just never even thought I'd live to this point, but I thank God that I'm here.
I get angry when people say it's not important. If we forget our history, we are doomed to repeat it.
There'll be a praying, there'll be praying, there'll be praying over me. And before I pass leave, I'll be buried in my grave.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
The year is 1960. Dwight D. Eisenhower is president. In baseball, the Pittsburgh Pirates upset the New York Yankees to win the World Series 4-3. And in Rome, a brash young fighter who would proclaim that he could float like a butterfly and sting like a bee wins Olympic gold.
I am the greatest.
The hottest movie at the box office is the thriller Psycho, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and the novel To Kill a Mockingbird, written by an unknown writer from Monroeville, Alabama named Harper Lee, is published. An instant bestseller. The Pulitzer Prize-winning book tells the story of a black man wrongly accused of assaulting a white woman and would help to shape the way America viewed race. In music, the velvet voice of soul singer Jackie Wilson scores a top 10 hit with a mid-tempo song about unrequited love.
You better stop, dogging me around. If you don't stop,
The cultural anthropologist and writer Zora Neale Hurston dies. And in politics, the junior senator from Massachusetts, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, declares his candidacy for the highest office in the land. On the world stage, the U.S. intervenes in an internal conflict between warring factions in South Vietnam and commits the first of nearly 3 million troops to help stop the spread of communism. But back home in America, another war is brewing. One that will not be fought in the jungles of Southeast Asia, but rather on the blistered sidewalks of cities and towns all over this nation. Greensboro, Selma, Montgomery, Wichita, Durham, Baltimore, Rock Hill, Savannah. It would begin as all storms do, the gathering clouds of discontent for centuries of degradation and oppression. The first drops of rain, a warning, a Douglas, a Harriet, a Sojourner, a Garrison, portent of things to come. A clap of thunder, a declarative statement, yes, I am a man. The deluge, hundreds of leather soles on asphalt growing into thousands, marching for the ancestors, marching for themselves, marching for the generations yet unborn. A wave of protest that wasn't going to let nobody turn it around.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, y'all, marching up to freedom land.
Courage, a noun, from the Latin cor, meaning to have heart. The quality of mind or spirit that enables a person to face difficulty, danger, pain, without or in spite of fear. Having the courage of one's convictions, to act in accordance with one's beliefs, especially in spite of criticism. Have you ever seen courage? Do you know what it looks like? Can you recognize its gait, its appearance? Is it a grand act like those done in Hollywood films and in sports arenas? Or can it be quiet in its expression, done without thought of reward or recognition? Can you see it in the faces of high school and college students, 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, entering a segregated dining room on March 16, 1960, at Levy's department store, to champion the principles of freedom and equality? Can you recognize it in the faces of Ernest Robinson, Joan Tyson, and Carolyn Quilloin, jailed for taking a stand by sitting down? Each a David facing a Goliath of bigotry and injustice. Can you see it in W.W. Law, field general of the movement, whose self-effacing demeanor and sincere humility were matched by a deathless commitment to the inherent nobility of all? Can you see it in the fierce commitment of Hosea Williams, who Dr. King once called his fiery Negro? Can you see it in the thousands of mostly nameless faces whose belief in the dignity of all mankind would never garner the attention of the public or the press? But more than that, can you see it in yourselves? A whisper, a flickering flame, a sprouting seed, waiting to answer the soul's call that haunts us all. What will I do? What will you do? What will we do when the integrity of what we say we believe in is tested in the cauldrons of life? For all of you here today, and for those who could not be, for those who have suffered, who have bled, who have gone to jail, who have sacrificed so much that we might know a fuller measure of freedom. To you, I say thank you for showing us the face of courage. Good morning. My name is Masud Olufani. I am a proud graduate of SCAD's M.F.A. in sculpture. On March 16, 1960, Carolyn Quilloin Coleman marched to the lunch counter at the Azalea Room with Joan Tyson and Ernest Robinson by her side. From that lunch counter to the moss-draped pathways of Savannah State College, to the streets of Greensboro, North Carolina, she has woven a legacy of civil rights activism that continues today. A friend observed of Carolyn, she understands that she has a responsibility to use her gifts to open up doors of opportunities for other people. Carolyn found her calling as a champion of equality for all. Her journey has taken her through the ranks of the NAACP. Today, she is the secretary to the NAACP National Board of Directors and the vice president of the North Carolina NAACP. Carolyn's life is a song of strength and virtue. Her courage that day on March 1960 and her continued activism echoes its melody for generations to come. Please join me in welcoming Miss Carolyn Quilloin Coleman.
Thank you. Good morning, Savannah. It's a joy to be home again. The decade of the 60s was filled with racial unrest across America. Perhaps it began on February 1, 1960, when 4 students at North Carolina A&T State University were arrested for sitting in at Woolworth's lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina. Students across the country replicated their actions, so it was no surprise when students in Savannah decided to sit in. Savannah was segregated in every phase of life: lunch counters, schools, buses, parks, movie theaters, and churches. The Savannah NAACP Youth Council decided that we too would sit in. So 46 days after the sit-in in Greensboro, we chose March 16, 1960, as our date. The day began in school as most days, but approximately 1:30 or 2 o'clock that afternoon, several names were blurted out over the public address system. Louis Scott Stale, Mabel Morris, Joan Tyson, Carolyn Quilloin, Leah Vaney, Joan Scott, Jeanette Green, and several others. Come to the principal's office immediately. We were not the usual students that were called to the principal's office, so our teachers and classmates were somewhat perplexed. We sat down in the principal's office, who was Mr. Otha Douglas, and he said that he knew what we were planning to do that day. He said that we were guinea pigs for the NAACP, pawns, if you will. We were throwing away our future. If we incurred an arrest record, we would not be admitted to a reputable college. If we were admitted, we certainly would not find a good job. He admonished us not to do it. When he finished, he looked around the crowd to see if anyone would have anything to say, certainly to support what he had said. But Louis Scott Stale told him that we were not guinea pigs for the NAACP. We are the NAACP, Louis said. He felt that we had to do what we knew had to be done in Savannah. Mr. Douglas thanked him and told us to return to our classes. At 4 p.m. that afternoon at the First African Baptist Church, there we had prayer and reviewed our charge. We divided into groups of 4. Each group had a watcher or observer who would watch for us to see that no violence took place. So we left First African Baptist Church, walked to Crest, McCrory's, and Woolworth's. Joan, Ernest, and I, along with another student, walked down Bay Street to Abercorn. The mood was somewhat somber and quiet. As we walked, I noticed that Ernest had, who was a student at Savannah State, had his hand open at one point and then he closed it. He would open it and look at it again. I asked him, Ernest, what is wrong with your hand? He indicated that he had 2 Bible verses written in his hand. One was the 24th Psalm, and the other was a passage from the 23rd Psalm. The verse from the 23rd Psalm read, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadows of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me." That verse uplifted us, because while we knew that anything could happen to us, we certainly didn't expect any violence in Savannah. We were very familiar with what had happened to Emmett Till, a 15-year-old student who was killed in Mississippi for allegedly whistling at a white girl from across the street. While we thought that we were safe in Savannah, we knew that anything could happen again. When we arrived at Levy's, there were 20 to 25 white people, including the police, holding the doors open. We walked in and sat at the lunch counter at the Azalea Room. Now, the Azalea Room was one of the nicer restaurants downtown, so they certainly were not going to let us eat there. The waitress never attempted to serve us. She simply told us she could not, but advised us to leave. She would summon the police. When we refused to leave, the police came, handcuffed us, and took us to jail. There we were booked and placed in cells. Ernest was on one side of the jail, and Joan and I were in a cell in another side of the jail. We arrived after 5 o'clock, so the dinner hour had ended. There we were served bologna sandwiches. And I tell you that I don't eat bologna today. Because everywhere that you went in that cell, you could smell it. This was a Thursday, and on the following Sunday, the NAACP called a public mass meeting at the Bolton Street Baptist Church. The membership there decided that Negroes would boycott the downtown stores until they were desegregated, until they hired Negro salespersons and treated us with dignity and respect. We boycotted the stores for 18 months, holding a mass meeting every week. Savannah was one of the first cities in the South to desegregate, long before the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We felt that this was the beginning of the modern day civil rights movement. And we laid our bodies down as bridges that others might walk over into freedom, and the struggle continues.
Good morning. I'm Ayeola Johnson, a SCAD Arts Administration alumna. As a young girl, Edna Jackson first embraced the civil rights movement as a member of the Savannah NAACP Youth Council. This paved the groundwork for her lifelong pursuit of social justice. As mayor of Savannah, the first African-American woman to hold the position, Edna seized what Alice Walker called being a part of the world community. Throughout her career, Edna has asserted herself as a formidable force for good. A testament to her vigilant work, Edna garnered an NAACP Freedom Award and was named an unsung hero by the Savannah Civil Rights Museum. She stands as a paragon of Savannah's progress. Please welcome former Mayor of Savannah, Mrs. Edna Jackson.
Good morning. Oh, I had to get my composure. When I was a 9-year-old girl, my grandmother took me to the Savannah NAACP Youth Council meeting. There I met Wesley Wallace Law, who told us our history, our stories, and the injustices of the African American people, and the power we had as young people to fight for change. On March 16th, approximately 15 students sat at lunch counters all over downtown. The arrest at the Azalea Room was a defining event that made us realize the injustices that had taken place. That moment stood for more than a desire to eat at the lunch counters. It was about creating jobs, about totally integrating the Savannah community. Our leaders in Savannah acted ahead of their time, so much so that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke in our city saying, "My services are not needed here. You have excellent leadership," and left us under the tutelage of Mr. Law, Attorney Gene Gadsden, Hosea Williams, attorneys Bobby Mayfield, Aaron Bushbaum, and many, many, many more. As we walked to Broughton Street on March 16, 1960, Mr. Law, Attorney Gadsden, and Mrs. Jessie Stell, our advisor, said, "You're not going without knowing the reasons." And they trained us. I was 15 years old. I served as one of the lookouts. My grandmother was worried about my safety because I was a fighter. She sent Mercedes Wright Arnold to look over me. Mercedes Wright Honor, the sweetheart of the movement. She is here today. The arrest of Carolyn, Joanne, and Ernest began the first phase of fighting for true integration. The Azalea Room stands as the center from which these positive changes arose. As desegregation moved forward in Savannah, I finished high school continued with the NAACP as a youth task force worker in Florida and Alabama, training and teaching others how to demonstrate. These were powerful moments that carried Mayor Floyd Adams, Mayor Otis Johnson, and me to where we are today, that determined the course of our lives, our ability to lead others as mayors of Savannah. I'm proud to have been a part of this story, to be here today with Carolyn and Joan and Ernest's family and friends. I would like to acknowledge the alumni, the classes of Beach, Tompkins, Johnson, Savannah State, and other adults who joined us in the walks to Broughton Street from the First African Baptist Church. I'm going off scripts. Can the lights come up? And I'm going to ask those members to please stand. I would never forget the branch members, the older people who supported us. I honored the Jewish community and citizens from all over who played a pivotal role in supporting us, for this was not just a movement of the African American community. Also, this unveiling could not have happened without the support of Todd Gross and the staff of the Georgia Historical Society. And a special thanks to Richmond Ferguson of the class of 1962. Members of the mayor and members of the City of Savannah staff and the SCAD staff, we thank you. Finally, I would like to commend the President Wallace, who believes in honoring the people of Savannah and their stories. She came to us with a vision to form SCAD, a university that works to preserve the jewels of this city. She partnered with Wesley Law to acquire and help to restore the Beach Institute. She stands to honor his legacy, our heritage, Savannah's story, our actions to make this city better. I stand to honor Paula Wallace. Thank you. Thank you, President Wallace, for listening to the unsung heroes of Savannah and telling their tales so that our common history is remembered and celebrated. Savannah, the journey will continue. Thank you.
In 1964, beloved poet Langston Hughes penned the poem Dream of Freedom as the anthem of the NAACP. The poem ends, "To save the dream for one, it must be saved for all. Our dream of freedom." His words voice the collective effort to capture a dream, a united front like the one that formed in Savannah 5 decades ago. My name is Felicia Bell, a SCAD Historic Preservation alumna. In 1978, Paula Wallace created SCAD as a sanctuary for all dreamers, makers, and scholars. Today's commemoration of the Azalea Room sit-ins stands as a cornerstone in Savannah's canon of preservation. Please welcome SCAD President and Founder, Paula Wallace.
Today we celebrate social justice, goodness, and the transformation engendered by it. Thank you, Felicia, Ayeola, Brittany, Masud, former Mayor Jackson, and also the Georgia Historical Society. Most importantly, I offer my gratitude to Carolyn, Joan, and the late Ernest Robinson. It's no secret that young people hold the power to rend and remake the fabric of society through acts both political and creative. When I arrived in Savannah in 1978 to plant the acorn that became SCAD, I felt a little like a seedling, a bit too small to stand alongside the oaks of this city's history. I needed a friend. Well, it didn't take long before I met the man who would help root me in the soul of Savannah's untold stories, a kindred spirit who, as in the book of Matthew, let his light shine before men. See, SCAD needed professors. When you start a new university, it turns out you need to hire faculty. The man I needed to meet, everyone said, was W.W. Law. They said he was a man of letters. They said he knew everybody. How he delivered the mail. He was a man of letters in more ways than one. So I called Mr. Law, who gave me a hearty recommendation for a new faculty member, and a friendship was born. Mr. Law and I saw eye to eye. After all, we were practically the same height. He was a little bit taller. Together, we explored how we would help our community thrive by resurrecting historic structures and engaging the whole of the Savannah community. Though we may have been small in stature, our hearts shared a desire as grand as the mightiest oak. It was Mr. Law who told me the story of what happened that day in the Azalea Room in 1960. He opened my eyes to stories others wanted to forget. With the addition of each new SCAD structure, I saw the stories inside each edifice, what each building had been and what it could be. For example, during the restoration of Arnold Hall, we discovered a historic mural depicting the great leaders of the city with two curious omissions. Not a single African American nor any women represented. SCAD was proud to right that wrong. Earlier this year on Georgia Day, the university illuminated the Arnold Hall Theater with the Savannah Women of Vision, including Mother Matilda Beasley, Chief Justice Leah Ward Sears, and other monumentally distinguished and accomplished women. As you peel back the layers of the city like coats of paint on ancient walls, more stories are revealed. The building that is now the SCAD Gen Library holds a chapter in Savannah's history. When I learned of the desire to place a historic marker at that entrance, I knew it must be done. Over the years, Mr. Law and I wrote one another often, and I kind of still swoon over his penmanship. In every missive, he did something rather unusual, ending every question not with a question mark, but with a period. After SCAD acquired the Beach Institute, an African American cultural center, donating it to the King Tisdall Cottage Foundation, I received a letter from Mr. Law thanking SCAD for the purchase. He wrote, "Is it possible for you to start your work crew on this building within the next week or 10 days? End quote, no question mark, just matter of fact, period. I believe my dear friend never used question marks because, like others in this community, he'd spent his whole life asking and asking. He'd run out of question marks.
Is it possible to give all Savannah school children an equal education, period? Is it possible to resist inequality without violence, period? Is it possible to exalt and preserve the legacy of African Americans in Savannah, period? It was an expression of the frustration of those who fight injustice feel. Mr. Law became weary of asking. 55 years ago, 3 souls stopped asking for the right to eat at a lunch counter, right? Transforming their questions into a collective statement of goodness and justice and right. The power of their heroic act echoes across history, a history that will never be forgotten.
There's a train a-coming, don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All we need is faith to hear the diesels humming, don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord.
Get ready, there's a train to Jordan, picking up passengers from coast to coast. And faith is the key, open up the door and board them. All we need is hope among love the most.
People get ready, there's a train a-coming, don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All we need is faith to hear the diesels humming, don't need no ticket, we just thank the Lord.
And there ain't no need for the hopeless sinner who would hurt mankind just to save his own. And have pity for those whose truths are broken, 'cause there ain't no hiding from the King.